So I want to first of all start by saying a little prayer. And like with all things in my culture, we start by sort of inviting the creator, the divine source of all that is, right? And so we start by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Um, I'm just going to say a little prayer in Arabic and I'll explain what that means. So Bismillahir
Thank
Rahmanir
you.
Rahim translates roughly as in the name of God, the Creator, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Um, and so it's a way of inviting the Creator, the source of all that is, and having some support or structure from the source, the origin of creation, which in the Islamic culture is called Allah, or in, Christian culture in English would be called God, or in Jewish culture would be Yahweh, or um, whichever label is used, like it's always referring to the same source, the origin. And so this little prayer is really a prayer designed to um, create a guidance, as it were, and to kind of open up the path in front of us. So I'll just start with that first. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين Ameen. And now into this sacred space that we open, I would like to invite each of us that are in the space to open up to and be supported by the divine in all its forms, to the higher selves of ourselves, to the innermost truth of that which we are. I invite in all of our spirit guides and our helpers that are here for our furtherment, for our highest good, for the most benevolent of support. Any guardians, any angels, any ancestors, any spirit guides, any spirit animals, any support, any beings, any tribe, any family, both from before, from what is to come, from who we are, from who we have been, and for all that we are connected to. And from this place of divinely supported, protected, guided spirit, I invite that protection to extend out from us to the community of people that connect to and listen to this episode, listen to this conversation that is about to unfold. And I invite them to also give permission, if they feel comfortable, for the support to extend to them so that they may receive the knowledge, the information, the wisdom, and the guidance that is intended for those that will benefit from this exchange that occurs between us and between them, the listeners, the audience, and that any of their support and guidance that serves them and is around them also holds them in a safe space so that they may fully receive and be receptive to whatever it is that flows between us, because we are all beings of light and energy. And as beings of light and energy, the vibration and the sound that comes out of our mouths is just frequency and knowledge and information and wisdom. And encoded within the words that we speak are the intentions and the knowings that resonate from the deepest depths of our beings and come out into the form of the brevity and light that is life. And just really feel all of that anchoring and grounding and centering. And I invite you both, Kirsty and Sam, to take a moment each and to step into the space with whatever you feel inspired to use to presence and anchor yourselves and to invite into the circle that which supports you as you feel appropriate to do so.
Thank you, Farhan.
What a way to start. Farhan, that's exactly what I needed today. Are you kidding me? Beautiful.
So would you each like to take a turn and just step into the circle with some words, some prayer, some blessing, some offering, whatever feels right to you as well?
Kirsty, do you want to go, love?
Okay, I'll step in. So I'm bringing my beautiful angel guide with me. She is top to toe in white with beautiful long hair. I always see her in my meditations, and when we're asked to bring, you know, our spirit guides in, and she's there always leading. And I just want to come into this space with a really open heart and open mind, because today's been a bit frantic, and I'm here to let that go and just be present in this conversation and trust that where it goes connects with the listeners and it gives them exactly what they need in this moment, just how Farhan has connected with me for what I need in this moment.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, lovely. Farhan, that was beautiful. Thank you. I have a plethora. I have many guides with me right now. I was like, wow, there's loads of them. So thank you for that.
Most welcome.
And I had some, oh, that was just beautiful. I've got spirit animals from way back and the new fairies and the, oh my goodness. So,
Fantastic.
and it's going to be playful and joyful for me. I've got lots of fairy action going on at the moment. So, thank you for
Excellent.
opening that space and
You're most
yeah,
welcome.
really fun. And for our audience, just to enjoy the flow of this conversation. I'm very excited about it. And just, yeah, let's see how it all unfolds. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So with that, would you like to start, Sam, by sharing how we crossed paths and then Kirsty and kind of how this has come about? Because I feel like it starts really well if you start the story and then Kirsty picks up and then I can kind of contribute my take into the conversation as well.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's a great story.
Okay. Oh my God. So we have the amazing Farhan with us today, and we're just going to dive straight into the conversation. I met Farhan in Thailand. What island were we on?
Koh Samui.
Nui.
Koh Samui, that's right. So I adventured to Koh Samui with Kirsty to a spiritual retreat with some gorgeous friends and coaches of ours, Ollie, True, and Denisa. Please, someone pronounce her surname for me.
Rataluya?
That sounds lovely. I knew you'd be
better
able
than
to
how
do
I
that.
say it.
I really must learn that. It's Romanian, isn't it? So
Yeah.
Ollie and Denisa, and
Wasn't it
we
the
rocked
beautiful
up.
you?
Yes, Beautiful You. That was it, the retreat. It was my first real deep dive spiritual retreat, actually. And
Oh wow.
I remember arriving. Gosh, it was just, yeah, really beautiful setting, just stunning. And then meeting Farhan, honestly, my initial impression of Farhan was just, you're this big, beautiful, open-hearted bear, and all I wanted to do was hug you. I was just like, I want to hug you.
I love
And you
giving
just,
hugs.
oh my
Yeah,
God, I could literally just give you the biggest hug right now. And did we arrive before you? I'm trying to remember exactly where it was that we we first spoke, but it was your voice has such a grounding
Thank you.
resonance to it. I literally automatically felt very safe, very grounded, and I just knew I was going to hug you a lot. So it was really beautiful. And then we just spent this magical week going through all sorts of incredible stuff, and just opening up. And you were really a beautiful foundational force there for me. Really
Oh, wow.
solid and really, really safe.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, it was really, really great. And watching your process and your vulnerability as well. Like you're this beautiful, grounded, powerful man, but were also able to express vulnerability and work through your stuff. I just thought it was such a privilege to witness and be part of with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Such an honor. I just
Thank you,
remember when I
darling.
first kind of came across and we met. I think it was on the porch just outside where
Yeah.
the dining area was, and there was those chairs in the corner, and I think you'd sort of had a little drink or something and you were curled up a little and something. And I was just like, I remember seeing this, oh my God, like you've got this beautiful sort of I I wanted to say fairy energy, but I was just like, I wasn't quite sure kind of where people are at. And I know you have to kind of give people permission to show up in the level to which they're open and receptive. We just had this really beautiful, playful energy. It was just like so light and
Yeah.
so just joyful and so full of life. And I was just, oh my God, it's so awesome. There's like such awesome people here. I'm so glad I came.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was super.
And how about you, Kirsty?
yeah, I mean, everything that Sam said, like you've just got this presence, and like Sam said, like Sam said, you just feel really safe in your energy. And I
Thank you.
just find you are just full of wisdom. And it's almost like it's you are connected. The words
Appreciate
that
that.
you speak come from somewhere of, someone of great wisdom, great experience. And it's really hard to put into words. But
But that's okay. Just go with what feels right.
yeah, like you're such an old soul with so much wisdom.
Oh,
And like my big takeaway from Thailand, we won't go into all the detail with it,
sure.
but this was my very first real spiritual experience.
Oh, wow.
I've heard about other people's, and I was just there like, does that really happen, and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember this one time we were sat, and we were doing a workshop on meeting your spirit guides, and we were still doing our detox because we did a 3-day juice
It's
detox and
fast.
then
Yep.
based after that. And we were all sat outside in this porch, and if you can really picture it, we're in like the tropics. You've got the sea and the ocean is way behind all the trees and the bushes, and within the Thailand um like grasses and all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And we were sat in the porch, and Ollie took us into a meditation, and the thunder and lightning was incredible. Like you'd never heard of it, but we were all closed eyes, and you could see the brightness of the lightning. Anyway, and this was our time to make our spirit guide. And as it so happens, Farhan, this was the first time my spirit guide came to me. You know how I say she's all in white and
Yeah.
she's beautiful. That
Oh,
was the first time
bless.
I met her. And
Oh,
she's
bless.
here today with me. Oh my goodness,
Oh,
just put that
bless.
connection together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she was at the
Oh,
front of this boat
I'm getting
of
all goosebumps.
coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
And anyway, I had this incredible, scary, life-changing experience with this. And it
Yeah,
was thank you to Farhan, who grounded me. And whatever happened to me, he took it away from me and grounded it. And you were literally my hero that day, because I was so shook up and
yeah.
so in shock from what had
course,
happened,
of course.
that you made it feel safe by taking it from me and grounding whatever it was. And I will always be forever grateful for that, because I was hysterical, and you just really helped that situation in such a huge way. And like I said, Farhan, just so grateful for you for taking that.
Absolutely, and it was such a pleasure. Like, so it was a real honor and a privilege to be able to be of service in that manner. And like, I just want to touch briefly on kind of something you mentioned a little earlier. And like, I genuinely am grateful for sort of you seeing me as being the source of wisdom and grounding. But I just want to share like a little secret, if I may, right? I don't have a clue. I don't know any of it. It comes out of me. It makes sense to the people that listen, but half the time I have no clue what's going on. I don't know what's being spoken, but I've learned that sometimes if we get out of our own way, we can connect with and access that infinite wisdom that knows everything. And so then it looks like the appearance of it coming through me, or me being the vehicle of, or the sort of, the one that's doing it. But actually, like, I'm only ever the servant, is the way I look at it. And sort of, I guess it stems from kind of a childhood curiosity that started at a very young age. And I guess this is kind of maybe a nice way to sort of talk you through my journey a little.
Yeah, I would love to know.
It's
Yeah.
not something I share about very publicly very often, only because like it just doesn't feel appropriate, and there's so many other things people want to talk about. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that stuff instead. But like I'm one of those kids that as I grew up, I was always fascinated by the unseen world. And when I say the unseen world, it's not that I knew there was something unseen. It was just like I remember learning about like chi, and I was 14 and I was in a library at school, and I read this book, and it talked about this guy, and he was a Tai Chi master, and he was working in a Chinese kitchen, and the oven blew up in his face, and he had third-degree burns over half his body. He'd lost eyesight in most of one eye, and the other eye was completely gone. And the doctors were like, "You'll never recover. You'll be scarred for life. You'll never be able to function or operate." And within 6 months, he'd completely recovered. And as a Tai Chi practitioner, he'd somehow used this energy, this chi, whatever it was. As a child, I'm like, I don't know what this stuff is. Like, I'm not brought up with it, but like, I was like curious, like, what is this thing? Like, how did he suddenly like go from like, never being able to survive properly to suddenly he's fully recovered, and like in 6 months, like not even like a full year. And so then the curiosity in me was always like, what is this energy thing that these Chinese monks and Tai Chi people are talking about, this chi thing? And so then like the curiosity behind it, I kind of came across one of my RE teachers who was like really helpful whenever I wanted to like find out more. And I was like, I want to learn more about this like Chinese Buddhist, I don't know what it is, but like they talk about this chi thing. And she was like, well, why are you going looking in other religions when like you've got the equivalent in your own religion? And I'm like, what do you mean? And because she knew I was Muslim, because I was doing like a Muslim GCSE. And just on that, I'll come back and like explain a little what were the words we said right at the beginning in Arabic, but maybe we'll pause that for a second. Um, and basically, actually, now that I mentioned it, just really quickly, the prayer was basically saying a prayer to God, the merciful, the beneficent, like you praise the Creator for all of the attributes of him being benevolent, well, caring for us, being the source of everything that's been created. And then we're asking him for guidance to show us the straight way, the path of the ones that he favors, and not the path of those who are led astray. And so, like, and in really kind of loose terms, the way I understand it, because as you'll come to realize throughout this conversation, I'm not your traditional Muslim. I'm not your typical religious person, and I'm certainly not like your typical spiritual person or scientific person, but I like to imagine I have a bit of a foot in all of those areas and arenas. And so for me, when I look at the meaning of the word Muslim, it's an Arabic word that translates to one who is at peace. And the word Islam means to be at peace. So it's basically somebody who's in balance within themselves and their world, their reality. And a Muslim is translated from meaning one who has submitted to the divine will of the creator. Like that's the literal translation. And if I take that to be, okay, well, creator is the divine source of all that we are, and the divine origin of what we come from. And alignment with that is listening to your inner voice, to your intuition, to your inner guidance, then loosely, and any Muslims out there, like, don't have at it. Like, this is my interpretation of how I see life. The term Muslim for me refers to anybody who's listening to their inner voice of the guidance that leads them through life. And, what you label that guidance that comes from within, how you understand that and how you interpret that, there's all different cultures and traditions and rituals packaged up in different forms with different labels that we call religion or religious practice. And, just like people do a meditative practice or a yoga practice, or, there are different spiritual practices. And it's not to say there's anyone that's right or wrong, but just, religion is a structure, a framework, and it serves a purpose, and it's a tool, which for some people is a tool for the afterlife, to get them to heaven, to save them from hell. For other people, it's a tool that they use to shape and guide how they exist in this world in relation to others. And for some, it's like God says you have to do it, so you just do it, right? And for everybody, it's what's right for them. Like, I don't proclaim to have any monopoly on the truth, and I certainly don't believe on imposing my perspective on others. But I do like to share how I see things and question other people to understand better what is the reality or perspective that they're observing or that they're seeing from, right? So, slight detour, that will probably happen. That's the common theme in my life. I start off on one
Perfect.
tangent, and the thing is, I kind of like the idea where most people want to go from A to B. I'm like, what if we just meander down a garden path that goes all over the place and actually get to see more flowers along the way? And we still arrive there eventually, right? It's just we didn't go straight there. We kind of took a few detours along the way, right? Who
Yeah.
knows what fruits we pick up along the way?
Take the scenic route, hey?
Exactly, exactly. Life is so much better when you stop and smell the roses, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So just going backtracking a little onto the story of my youth, my RE teacher knew that I was Muslim, and I had this interest in understanding this kind of chi energy thing. And she's like, well, you've got this whole mystical tradition in Islam called Sufism. And I'm like, and this was the first time I had ever heard this phrase, because growing up, like, you never hear about these things. And as much as I was curious and wanted to understand and know, nobody could ever give me answers. Like, I was always that annoying child that had to question everything, never took it at face value. And like, I would just annoyingly keep asking why, not because I was trying to be annoying, because I was genuinely trying to understand.
Just a
And nobody
genuine
else,
curious. Yeah.
right? And nobody else seems to understand it at the level that I'm trying to figure it out. So then it just became annoying. So then eventually as a child, I just learned to stop asking and talking, because it was like, it just annoy everyone. And so, you know what, like, let's just not do that. Let's just stay in our books and stay in our own little world. So even like as a kid, like, you would not believe it, I was the shyest kid ever. Like, when I changed schools, I literally asked the teacher, can I stay indoors and read a book during the break period so that I wouldn't have to go outdoors and I wouldn't have to play with the other kids? And this is
Wow.
like when I was like 10, 12, right?
Mm.
So I grew up very reserved and very introspective. And so when I learned about this thing called Sufism, I'm like, okay, this is curious. I don't know what this is. I'll have a look. Do a bit of exploring. So I found a few books, started to read some different interpretations of what it is. And it basically, if you imagine psychotherapy, Sufism is like spiritual psychotherapy that's been passed down word of mouth, generation to generation, as a living tradition for as long as humanity's been alive, right? And the thing is, it's always been clothed and hidden and guarded, and it's only ever been passed person to person. And so it was never something that was public or visible, but it was one of those things. If you knew, you knew. And if you didn't know, you weren't missing out because you never knew there was anything more anyway, right? And one of the basic principles of Sufism I learned at a very early on stage as a young child was that there's like this concept of an alarm that's gone off, like a ringing bell that just doesn't stop, and it's incessant, and it's going off on the inside. It's going off on the inside of somebody who is searching. It's like suddenly there's a seeker that's been woken up on the inside with an insatiable curiosity to know the truth, to know reality, to know what is real. And like you just like once that's woken up inside of you, it can't be shut down, it can't be closed off, it can't be put to rest. You can't escape it. And no matter what you do, it just plagues you everywhere you go, right?
Thanks you.
And so literally, like I started having this insatiable curiosity about what is this spiritual tradition? What are the practices? Because like I was reading it and it was like, oh my God, there's all these miracles. And there's all of these miraculous things. Like there's one story of there was a Sufi gathering, and like there was a child there who was barely 13, and all of these adults were sat there around this master who basically possessed like wisdom and knowledge that they wanted to learn. But they weren't able to absorb it, they weren't able to receive it because they were so filled in their own heads of what they thought they knew and how they thought it should be. And they couldn't apply the practices that they were being taught to use to silence the mind and to basically in Sufism, it's about understanding and connecting with the heart and the wisdom of the heart, and this idea that we live in a reality where we are reflections of each other. And if you shine the mirror of your heart enough, your image disappears and all you see is the world reflected. And so, like, in that, like, really, like, it's taken me like 20, 30 years, and I still barely grasp and understand the essence of what that is. But the example in one of the stories was this sort of teacher. He got this 13-year-old child to open a book that was in a language he didn't know and to start reading from it. And the child obliged. He said, whatever the teacher tells me to do, I'll do. And even though the child has no knowledge of this language and he doesn't know anything about what's written, he opens the book and he just starts reading it. And like, and he understand, and the people sat there, they understand this other language the child's reading. And they're like, and the teacher, you know, they're sort of astounded by how is this even possible? And the teacher's like, because this child has stripped away their ego, because they're not attached to who they are, they can become whatever they need to be, right? And so in that moment, he became proficient in the language that he was instructed to read because that's what he was meant to do. And so like within Sufism, what like one way that it's described in comparison, as it were, for people to get a sense of what it represents, is that if the Quran represents the outward form of the religion of Islam, Sufism would be the heart of the Quran. And so like scholars need the book, And Sufis, they have the essence of what the book represents and the living translational version embodiment of it. And, in some circles, it's considered blasphemous. And, at some points in Islamic history, the people that were the greatest scholars in Islam became Sufis and then were punished for that depth of being and literally, punished by death for going to
Wow.
that point of sort of embodiment of the knowledge and understanding. A famous example is Al-Ghazali. And so Al-Ghazali, he basically studied all of the different forms of this, of like scholarly Islam, all the different schools of thought, all the different interpretations and everything. He understood it. He was like a master of understanding all of that. And then ultimately, he became so absorbed into the knowledge of the religion that he had that spiritual awakening. And no longer was he just reading it or making sense of it, he was embodying it. And in that embodiment of it, he then just, I think there's an incident where he then shouts out that he's the truth. And at that point, it's like he's then considered blasphemous because, only God has the truth. Like humans can never embody that. And at the time, it was one of those things where that was punishable by death. And so even though he lived his entire life as a scholar, as someone who was engaging with the mental faculties to learn and understand and study the scriptures, the text, the traditions, the culture, ultimately his spiritual awakening led to his ultimate kind of, journey to the other side. Um, and I don't know why it's bizarre. Like I wasn't even thinking of any of these things, but like I kind of mention all these examples and stories because there's like lots of mystical stuff that Sufi masters are reported to have witnessed or been a part of. So one example, there's a guy sitting in a gathering, he's a Sufi master, and he takes his sandal and he just throws it in the air and it disappears. And like a couple of days later, there's a caravan, like in Arab culture, like caravans used to travel the deserts as like large convoys to kind of because they would never travel alone. And so a caravan arrives a few days later, and they tell this story of how they were about to be robbed, and then out of nowhere, a sandal came flying out of the air, slapped the thief on the side of his head. He shouted really loudly. That woke them all up. They saw the thieves and chased them away. And then it was like the sandal that the master had thrown. At that very time, it then appeared over there. And there are stories of like masters literally appearing in front of people hundreds of miles away spontaneously, saying something and then disappearing and then being back where they were at home. And so like there's all of these stories, like there's so many more. And like as a child, I mean, I was only 14, 15 at this age, right? And I'm just like, oh, from learning about chi and this energy, suddenly there's like all of this other stuff. And I'm like, as a kid, oh my God, this is so exciting. Like, and the thing is, in the spiritual tradition of Sufism, if you chase it for the mystical, for the all of these amazing miraculous things, then you're never going to arrive because those are a side effect of being spiritually connected, of being in divine alignment, but they're not the purpose. They're the evidence of that this world isn't just a physical reality, that we're not just
Yeah.
physical beings, right? And it's embodied.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm really curious because you were such a young, impressionable, 14, 15.
Uh-huh.
Who who did you have? Okay, you had your RE teacher that, sounds amazing that she sort of, guided you towards, looking into Sufism. I'm curious, are your parents like stoic Muslims, or could you
Not
speak
at
to
all.
your parents about this, and were they open to exploring it with you, or open to you
Sure.
going exploring this? Because, from what you're saying, like Sufism was blasphemy, or is blasphemy in some people's, sort of thoughts patterns.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So, like, where were your parents stand.
Sure. So I've always been the black sheep of the family in so many different ways. So even diet, as a child, I was born with eczema. I ended up getting arthritis when I was like 14, 15 as well. And I ended up coming across a book that was talking about being vegetarian, cutting out meat and things. And that just caused tension in the house because everyone's like, was used to eating meat. And I was like, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm like, but I can see the difference it makes. And so I've always been like different in everything. Like just and I think part of it comes from me being a double Gemini. So I have a sun in Gemini and a moon in Gemini. And the best way I can describe it is a typical Gemini, they see things from two different perspectives, right? A double Gemini sees things from four different perspectives. And for whatever reason, it's not deliberate, but I'm always seeing a different perspective to what everybody else does. And so if somebody sees X, I'll see Y. If they see X and Y, I'll see Z. If they see X, Y, and Z, I'll be seeing A. And I'm not trying to be contrarian, but I'm just like challenging and questioning. And so when I initially kind of got curious, I didn't really openly talk much about it because I was very introverted anyway. So I just kept reading books. I just kept reading book after book after book. And before long, I discovered that so you know Aesop's fables
Yes.
and you know, 1001 Arabian Nights and all of those stories. So all of them come from Sufi traditions. So there are sources of the versions that are Aesop's fables that actually like Sufism predates in their traditions, in their history, similar stories that then became these modern fables. And you know, Aladdin, like even things like Aladdin and Arabian Nights, all of those things, they're like um distilled versions of these really old stories. And so in the beginning, I was just reading books that were stories, but then over time, like within Sufism, there's this concept of um you can only absorb the knowledge at the level of which you're at, right? And so two people can read exactly the same book, but depending on where they are, they'll understand it differently, right? And so when I started to really get into Sufism, and I was literally going to the library every week, taking out two, three books at a time, and then going back. And obviously, my mom seeing me doing this, she's taking me to the library and back. So then she's like, okay, well, like, what is this that you're getting into? Like, what is this stuff? So then I'm like, here, have a book, read a book. And so then she's like, okay, I'm going to keep up with you. And like
Wow.
me and my mom would get into conversations over these things. And like I would read, you know, 10 books in 3 weeks, and she'd be like halfway through the first chapter. And
But,
eventually,
but these aren't like books, these aren't like
no,
just
no,
these
no, these are like proper, like,
real in depth, challenge everything you believe about the world and about yourself.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Reading that many books. Wow.
Right. And like the thing is, because I discovered this author, Idris Shah, and he basically was like a bridge between the East and the West back in the 70s. And so he was taking Sufic concepts, Sufic principles, Sufic teachings, and literally providing them for a Western audience, which at the time is kind of what I'd been brought up in, right? So even though I'm an Asian in England, like born here in London, I've grown up with Western thinking, but I
Yeah.
still had like certain values that were Asian that I didn't know at the time. I only realized that when I ended up living in South Korea of like, wow, these are really Asian things. Like Asians over here do that as normal. And like I never understood growing up that not everyone's households were the same and people didn't have the same culture and tradition around, you know, the way you speak with your parents, the way you behave in front of elders, the way you and you know, there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of things in common. There are some things that are just like as an Asian, you would never even consider doing that. And the things I'd hear my friends doing with their parents or getting away with, like going out clubbing and stuff like that, it's like my parents would never give me permission to do that. And so, like, even though my mother was interested and wanted to be supportive and wanted to understand, and honestly, we had so many hours of conversation to the point where it became a running joke. If my mother and I are in a conversation, literally, like, you just couldn't get a word in. It would go for like 2, 3 hours at a time. And so like, but the thing is, I don't even remember what was in the substance of those conversations. I would just be challenging and questioning stuff, and I wouldn't be getting any answers to like, what is this or why is it that way or whatever. And so I just got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take what makes sense to me, and I'm just gonna discard the rest. And so over time, I ended up being fortunate to find what I feel is like a legitimate Sufi school. And like within the Sufi tradition, until you come of age, until you're 18, you can't, you don't have permission to be a student because you're not old enough to be able to make that decision for yourself yet.
Mm,
So I actually found a Sufi community that was literally 10-minute walk from my high school.
amazing.
I literally I found it in the yellow pages, and I'm like, and
Oh,
it
back in the day, Farhan, you're showing your age.
right.
Okay, kid, the yellow pages, this is what it is.
Yeah. So the yellow pages, right? It was awesome back then. It might be Thompson local now, but like it was
My
in
God.
school, it was in the local public library, and I just happened, I don't know why. I just happened to be flicking through the yellow pages, and I just saw this thing, and it was like, oh my God, there's like this is the Sufi something. Oh my God, let me go find it. It was literally like a 5-minute walk from where the library was. And so
So
then,
this is still when you were under 18?
yeah, so here I was 16. So
Okay.
between the ages of 16 and 17, I ended up going to an international school because I wanted to do the international baccalaureate diploma instead of A
Mm,
levels, only because I wanted to do maths and sciences and I wanted to do languages. And apparently in A levels, you can either do one or the other, but they
yeah.
don't really like timetable it that you can do both. So I was like, I want to speak French. I don't know why. I was just like, I really want to learn French, but I knew I really needed to do computing, and I
Mm.
couldn't understand why. And I think this is one of the things in life that I've realized. I always had a deep knowing or inner knowing, and I just trusted, I just followed, I didn't even question it. It wasn't even a thing of is there. It just if something comes up in me, I'm like, you know what, I'll just it feels right. I really want to do it. Let me just figure out a way to do it. And I
Wow.
never and because like the thing is, at the same time as I discovered Sufism, I was already knee deep in business books in the library just because they were fun. Like I found a book. So actually, no, I have to regress it. Go back a year or two. I got introduced to Tony Robbins. I was 13 at the time.
At 13?
Yeah. So I read Unlimited Power, and I started journaling like my vision and my goals, and so I was like, by 21, I'm gonna be a millionaire, and like
Oh
Wow.
all
my
the
gosh.
right. And I was only 14, so I'm like, I've got a few years. I can make this happen, right? Like
How
you know.
many 14-year-olds would actually pick that book up right now? You
Well,
know,
the thing is, an uncle gave it to me. He was like, "Oh, you might enjoy this," because
This
he saw me
is
constantly questioning and stuff. And then when I read it, like the first thing I did was like, "Okay, let me apply NLP to change my thing with carrots because I didn't like carrots, and I was like, I
oh,
reprogrammed myself,
let's play with this. Let's see if it works.
right?" And so then I was like, I started liking carrots. I was like, "This is so cool."
Okay, teach me. I need to teach the kids.
my God, this is so interesting. Farhan, can I just ask you, this is not your average childhood.
No.
So
Well, it
firstly,
was
do
my
you it was yours, obviously, but do you think the fact that do you think that you were already kind of shy and reserved, or do you think that came because of your curious nature,
oh
which
no no
came,
no
which,
no oh no. So all of that. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I don't really know, but my guess is because I was born with eczema, when I was a baby, my entire face was always bleeding. So my
Mm.
face, my hands, my legs, my elbows, my knees, everything was always bleeding. And so by the time I got to school, I had like permanent eczema, like weeping eczema all the time. So if I just scratched
yeah,
my face a little bit, it would just start bleeding. And so like I at school got called scary face and stuff apparently. I don't remember this.
right,
My elder sister was in the same school as me, and like she was a few years older, like primary school, and so like she would be looking out for me and taking care of me. And I think because my physical appearance was so different to what other kids were used to,
yeah,
because my sister had seen me as a baby
of
growing
course.
up, and I didn't know any different. I was just like, it hurts, I'm gonna like I wasn't even thinking, I was just like, I was just scratching because it feels good. I'm just
Mm.
scratching, and like, however many decades later, now I'm like, okay, there's toxicity, we got to detox, we got to eliminate the toxins from the body. get the body to cleanse and purify, and then the skin will heal. But like, back then it was like, let's try goat's milk, let's try this diet, let's try that diet, let's try this therapy, let's try that therapy, steroid cream. Like I was doing everything. And I think when I was about 13, 14, 12, 13, I got referred to the homeopathic hospital in central London.
Amazing.
And so then over the course of a few years with homeopathic treatment, then the eczema started to clear up, my skin started to heal, stop being so itchy and stuff. And so I think there's an element of that physical appearance that I had giving me the opportunity to be more disconnected.
Yeah.
Like to not relate or connect with kids as much.
So that in and of itself enabled you to go down this path of being into the books and being in that whole world.
Well, I kind
without
of
the distractions that not normal, but your general teenager would have had.
I'm not even sure though, because like I remember as a child, I always enjoyed talking to the adults rather than the other kids. Because like I wanted to know, like I want to talk about physics and like the universe and like quantum field and like atoms, and like I just remember whenever uncles would be over, there'd be like the typical uncles that just want to talk sports and politics, and I'd have no
Yeah.
interest in those. But the ones that were interested in like science and physics and like magnetism and electricity and all those cool, quirky things.
So
You know
who
what,
did you have
Farhan?
in your life?
Sorry, go on.
Who did you have in your life that gave you that space? Your mum obviously was very willing to explore stuff with you, but maybe not into the depths that you were ready for.
Yeah.
So you had this amazing RE teacher who sounds fantastic. But who else? So were any of your uncles there for you to talk to? Where did you go to with the brain that you had and the curiosity and the exploration that you wanted to do? Who did you have to speak to?
Okay. So I'm gonna have to repackage that question a little, if I may.
Excellent.
Um,
Do what you need
only,
to do.
yeah, only because like if I look back on it now from where I'm at, it wasn't a thing. Like I came into this life already self-sufficient in
Amazing.
that context.
Such an old
And
soul, Farhan. You've
well,
been
well,
before.
well, this is the thing. Like, it's not just about that thing of being an old soul, but also like it's like that thing of like if you do something often enough, it becomes a habit, right?
Yeah,
And so like I can say it now in a very different way to when it would have been back then. But I
sure.
came in already knowing, and so I never had any doubt. Like I didn't have any questions about it. It wasn't a what if, or I there was just certainty. And so because I always had that certainty within, I never doubted. It was just like, well, naturally, like I want to know or understand this stuff. And I think back to the Buddhist traditions, right? So within Buddhist tradition, when there's a reincarnation of a Rinpoche, of a Dalai Lama, of any one of the spiritual leaders within the Buddhist tradition, one of the things that they do is give them many examples of something and have them pick out the one that was theirs from a previous lifetime. And so they'll have like, 10 versions of a toy. They have to pick out the toy that was theirs. They'll have 10 versions of like beads and they have to pick out their old beads. And so like because they come into this lifetime still connected to that previous incarnation or the knowledge from that previous incarnation, um, I kind of feel like now looking back on it, as a child, I never challenged or questioned what was already known. And it was like there was a comfort or a confidence inside that I can only describe now with language
Yeah,
that I didn't have then, of like spiritual knowing and spiritual certainty. And it was almost like, when you've got a gift in Pass the Parcel and you've got all the layers and you've got the little uh, gifts within the gifts that are in the layers, and if you unwrap a layer you might find a prize along the way. It kind of was almost like that as a child, is like as I was peeling the layers away, I would find little nuggets of things that were like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. And it would just resonate, like, and it would just feel right. And it would just be like, oh, absolutely, that makes total sense. Obviously. Like, how can it be anything but? And so when I went and spent
That's
uh,
really beautiful.
yeah. And the thing is, the more I studied about um the practice of Sufism, because it was done in a way that there's a psychological element to it, and sort of there's an element of kind of the psychology behind what's happening and the interpretation of like the human psyche, the human condition, and how the how the teacher is illustrating a point through the storytelling so that learning point becomes a subject of study for the other students. And so like this whole sort of interrelationship, it's almost like to like the one of the books that was written on Sufism by Idris Shah was this book on the commanding self, otherwise known as the ego, right?
Yeah.
And so like concepts and ideas and things like that around the individual, around the psychology of what drives people, of what motivates people, of what gets them to engage. And it was done through like a lens of humor, a lens of levity, a lens of spiritual practice. But at the same time, like in parallel to the spiritual stuff, I'd already prior to this been reading the personal development books. And so I came into it from a context of I've studied some Tony Robbins, I understand NLP, I've kind of realized I can completely reshape my brain and what I think and what I feel at will by just reprogramming myself. And then that kind of led me to discovering books on business and teams and how teams are high performing and what makes a good team. And there's this great book, In Search of Excellence. And because I'd read Unlimited Power and Awaken the Giant Within, I thought In Search of Excellence was like another one of these like personal development books. And then suddenly at like 14, 15, I'm reading business books, like, you know, the top 100 businesses in the US. And they were like talking about what made those businesses so successful. And so I'm exploring like what is it, the human motivations? What is it that drives people? And so there's this innate curiosity that maybe it's that bit within me, the anthropologist, the social anthropologist, trying to understand what motivates people, what drives people, what engages people, and in the context of business, and then in the context of spiritual tradition, and then kind
Yeah.
of fast forwarding, like that then led me to then working in marketing, because in marketing it's all about communicating and messaging and influencing and engaging and creating participation through language and through messages. And so like there's kind of been this thread throughout life of trying to make sense of what is this brain, this mind, this awareness, what drives people, what's the intrinsic motivations. And within kind of the spiritual tradition, I kind of ended up like being able to abstract myself from getting personally involved, because suddenly I'm seeing it all as, oh well, the whole thing can be manipulated, the whole thing's a lesson, the whole thing's a learning. And so like let's get our ego out of the way, let's try to learn and master this. And so I wasn't attached, I wasn't trying to achieve a spiritual outcome, I wasn't trying to become something,
Yeah.
and I
Just follow.
wasn't attached. Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't attached to like the form it took. I wasn't attached to like who did I have to become, because I was just adamant. Like at this point, the bell's ringing so loudly inside. I'm like, I want to get to the truth. I want to know the source of all that is. Like that place from which Rumi created his epic, sort of poems and like his literally volumes and volumes. All of that came from like a place from within. And so like as I let go of and became less and less attached to an outcome, and I
Mm.
became more and more proficient in the practices, the religious, traditional, spiritual, daily activities that were part of like the Sufi tradition that I got indoctrinated into and I got the opportunity to become a student of. And then when I started applying those spiritual practices on a daily basis, and even, I mean, I remember when I was 14, 15, I bought a book to teach myself how to do Tai Chi because I couldn't find classes. And I was like, I want to learn this stuff. And so then, like, I remember at 15, I'm doing every morning my energy practices, and I'm feeling the chi moving between my hands. I'm feeling the energy moving in my body. And like, because I'm physically feeling it when I get into a position, when I'm, grounded as a tree, when I'm rooted, when I'm
Yeah.
feeling energies moving. So it's not like something I'm making up. I'm like, I'm doing the thing in the book. I'm feeling the result because I've been doing this now every day for like 6 months. And as a positive side effect, I've now got more stamina. I've now got more endurance. Like, I remember when I was doing circuit, like, so, during the time of GCSEs, like 15, 16 years old, I'm doing extracurricular activities because basically I've got to the point where I'm like, okay, if I want to do well in class, I need to exercise so I get more oxygen into my brain so that I can then like use my brain better, right? Like that's just the
Wow.
logic B because I've read Tony Buzan, I've read about mind mapping, I've read about speed reading. I'm like, okay, let's get our brain optimized and do the best performance we can at school, right? And like this is all like me doing my own stuff. Nobody's prompting me, nobody's saying, I'm just going to the library, finding books, getting curious. Oh, what's this? What's this? Let's read that. That looks interesting. And so I remember I was doing a circuits class after school, and like, it would be like an hour after school, and we just do like the same circuit like 4 or 5 times and just doing 5, 10 different exercises. And I got tired and I was like out of breath. And I was like, I just need to excuse myself. And I went to the loo. I didn't go to the loo, I just went into the changing room. And then I stood in like my Tai Chi pose for like a
Mm.
minute just to get my energy back. Because I knew by doing that I could replenish my energy. So I'm like, I'll do that. And then I went back out and I was like back on form again. And so I just as a kid, I was like doing it as a practical adjunct to like just getting through life and getting, through my classes and trying to put myself in the best position possible. So I got good grades, I was a good student, I was physically active. But there wasn't like in all of this time, like I wasn't actively trying to be spiritual or any of that. I was just doing whatever was next in front of me. And
What
so
what I really get, Farhan, was it's almost like you've come into this world fully surrendered and just trusting your discernment, trusting your intuition, and trusting the guidance that, I want to go to the book, I'm going to pull this book off the shelf. Oh, let's have a read of it. Right. Okay. That doesn't feel right to me, but I want to keep this and I'm going to bring that into my practice. And it just feels like you've just, when you were talking about just at the start, just meandering and just
yeah,
that literally feels how your life, to
Mm.
what you've shared has just literally been let going of ego, let going of any objectives, and let's just see curiosity and this like almost like adventure in you. Let's just see where this takes me. And it's just so inspiring to, like you say, just let go of any outcomes
yeah,
and let's just see where this takes us. Yeah, just incredible.
And what
absolutely.
I find really beautiful as well, it's like that you obviously have a motivation because you spoke about I want to do well at school, I want to get good grades. So I'm going to come to that in a minute. But um, because you were younger, I'm thinking about generally speaking, people don't get to this sort of stuff until much later, until they have some kind of thing go wrong in their life that they're then searching for something else,
Right.
right? That's generally what kind of happens, or they have an accident or something big happens and they find themselves in this path. But because you didn't have that, it was just curiosity and a knowing that took you there. So it feels like it was just like not easier, but just more in flow, more meandering, more just
Yeah.
wherever you want to go because of your age as well. And I just think that's really lovely. But
There is
what
something there. I just
supported you though? Was it
yeah, yeah.
just you? You must have had some space to do this
Well, no,
in.
so like this is and it's interesting as you're saying that I'm getting a really kind of significant component that I wanted to share. And
Great.
like so at the time that my mother was pregnant with me, she ended up craving burgers. And she literally would eat, I kid you not, 5 or 10 Big Macs in a single sitting. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Like
And
burgers.
sorry,
Like
like actual Big Macs. Yeah.
Big Macs.
oh,
Like
Big Mac,
actual
sorry.
Big
Okay.
Macs.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. Like she'd have like 4 or 5 Big Macs, even as many as 10 Big Macs in a single sitting when she was pregnant with me. And so like, and I've kind of played it back in my awareness, as it were. And the closest thing I can think of is at the time that she was pregnant with me, because my energy was so intense, the heaviness of what I was, because I've done this in my own life, right? Like if I want to dampen my energy, I'll eat a lot of meat in order to bring my frequency down to make it easier for the people that I'm about to interact with, right? Because I've noticed sometimes if I'm too high vibe, like it's like it's too much, right? And I'm sure you probably know a bit more, given we were in Thailand, what I mean when I say I'm too much, right? Like a little more than like the average person. Um, and so what I found in life was at times, without even knowing it, I'd suddenly crave meat and I'd eat it and it would dampen me. And then I wouldn't show up as fully in the context of like whatever was physically around me. And so then it meant
Yeah.
it didn't topple the boat as much or kind of push everyone else's buttons too much. And it would be easier for me to contain myself, only because I haven't yet figured out the mastery of
Yeah.
managing the energy non-physically, right? And so as a baby, before I was born, the only thing I can think of, because none of the other kids produced that same effect to my mom, and I'm one of 4 siblings, right? But at my time, my mom just craved the meat, right? And for me, it was like that transformative energy, the density of it allowed there to become almost like a buffer that gave me the safety to like be fully
Mm.
there, but without it completely kind of throwing her off. Because for the first, I think it was the first few months, she was like permanently having morning sickness. And
Mm.
then after I was born, I literally didn't stop like crying. And I was always awake and I wouldn't sleep. And eventually the doctors had to like give me a drug or something to like put me to sleep because she was like being sleepless. And the thing is, even as a young child, I had unlimited amounts of energy. Like I was just like always on, always go, right? And so like I think a part of it is coming into this dimension, I came already with a safety back, like a safety net. And I already had a layer of protection around me that kind of meant things bounced off me the way they may not have done for other people. And I was more
Amazing.
rooted in like my previous awareness.
Yeah.
And like that's the only way I can describe it is because when I came in, it seemed normal to me to like just the stuff that I was just like, I'm just interested in it. Like, why is it like it doesn't make any difference to me? Like, I basically went out of my way to avoid interacting with everyone else so nobody would say anything, and then I could just do my own thing, and then I never knew it was any different,
So
right?
you were happy within your own space and all the rest of it straight
Literally.
away. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And the thing is, I did miss out. Like, I did feel like I couldn't join in. I couldn't participate with everybody else in the way that they were with each other. And I kind of missed that a little because I was like, I wish I could just play like the other kids.
Yeah.
Same time, like, I was just okay with like, it's okay. Like, it doesn't bother me.
So
And
lovely.
I guess because of that, what happened was there was a kind of all of this preparation up until when I went to uni, and it almost prepared me for then when I did open up spiritually, because that
Mm.
was very, I went through a very kind of deliberate process of um finding people that understood how to use the chakras and the energy and learning to move the energy and the chakras and then connecting with people that were like working with earth energy, working with like plant energy, working with like these different things that were like just normal for them. And like I discovered them online in chat groups, and like I'd go into a chat group that was like all earth magic, and like there'd be different people and like the fairies and you know the dragon people, and like but they connected with these different energies, and for them it was real, and they were teaching how to do these things. Like I still remember to this day, Sienna Cade's Grove, and he literally had like step-by-step exercises you do to increase your sensitivity and awareness to the colors, to the energy, to the chakras, how you know, hold each color. And so when I was at uni, having already kind of started to discover this world of Sufism and spirituality and energy and all of that, I like my time at uni, as much as I was there for like an academic education, it was basically where I had my spiritual education.
And it's
And
where you found, would you say it's where you found your people, your tribe?
no, oh God, no. Oh God, no. No, 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 not at all. Like I was still a student, very much so. Like I didn't find my tribe until I realized already, like within the Sufi community, that was like my spiritual foundation. But then like my people, as it were, like it's been 10, 20 years of churn.
Wow.
Because like the thing is, the way I've realized life happens, right? It happens in layers, and you can only ever stay with those people that are at the layer that you're at, right?
Yeah, that's yeah.
And so when you unwrap a layer, like just like you have to discard that layer of your awareness of being, people then also fall away as well. And
Yeah.
so, like, you know, I've had friends over time, and I can count on one hand, literally, the people that I've stayed in touch with over more than 10 years. And it's not that I don't want to, it's just there are those people that like, you know, the handful of people that are like, it doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter where, we go back and we connect and we're on similar journeys and we go in tandem. But most people, they're kind of, this is what they're learning. And this lifetime, that's all they're gonna do.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I've realized like, so I understand reality differently because I've experienced it like in so many different ways, that it's like asking a chef to describe music through his palate. And it's like, but he can't if unless he's experienced music. And even then he'll only do a broad kind of dull um expressiveness of what the nuances of music are, because taste cannot be as refined as the intricacies of the individual sounds and beats and notes and flavors that music creates, right? And so
Yeah.
in that way, like to talk to people in a mental frame, right? Language has its limitations. Like language cannot be used to describe that which exists beyond the shape of thought and beyond the shape of form, right? And so unless you've crossed that boundary, unless you've been on the other side of that barrier, like I can only describe to you in sunsets and hues of blues and greens and reds, like the plethora of like multi-dimensional experiential of life, right? And so it's like, you know, if somebody's never tasted a mango and all they've ever had is a peach, well, you can say it's like a peach, but it's sweeter. But they don't know what's sweeter than a peach because that's all they've ever tasted of the sweetness. And then when they taste a mango, they're like, oh my God, this is so sweet. How come you never told me there was something sweeter? And it's like, well, you never wanted to stop tasting peaches. And so like we get to carry people with us on the journey. And I've learned over time to rebundle myself, right? So I show up as the person I need to be in the space that I'm invited into, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was one of the reasons why I deliberately wanted to start this conversation in the way that we did, so that then whatever's needed comes through. And I apologize. It feels like I've barely started talking, and I'm mindful of the time as well. And I'm just like, I've barely even like touched the corners of the nuances of what I was thinking we were going to possibly come to touch upon. And
Well, I think we'll have to have another one, Farhan, that's for sure, right? We'll have to have a
Yeah.
follow-up to it because I feel like we're just getting started. I've got so many questions that I'd really like to, and it will just meander and meander. And I just want to ask you this: when did you have or I think I might know the answer, but when did you have an awareness about this layering and only being able to be with people on a deep level for certain amounts of time, and when were you okay with that? That's because for me it took quite a long time. It was quite a long process, and definitely much later on in life than you. But did you have that straight away, or is that something you had to sort of go, okay, I need to work this out and actually be okay with that?
Say that again?
So when you're talking about like different people in your life and you can only resonate with the people that are same layer, and then people will leave because you're not gonna were you always okay with that? And did you always have an understanding of that, or has that come later and you've had to sort of
Yeah.
work that
So
out and be okay with it?
of course, of course. So the thing is, I basically had no clue. I didn't even realize it until maybe like 20 years after the fact. And it's
Mm,
just it's happened so gradually. Like the thing is, I was when I became mature enough to recognize the way in which my life has happened, it's only then looking back that I realized that's what happened. Because at the
right.
time I wasn't even aware of it. I didn't even notice it. Like I was too busy enjoying my life. I mean, I'm
Interesting.
like so in my experience of whatever is here and now that like it didn't even occur to me. Like, I grew up in London. I studied in the north of England. I My first job was in Switzerland. Then I was teaching English in South Korea. Then I was volunteering in San Francisco. And then I was like, volunteering in South Africa. And then back to London. And then I was out in Cheltenham. And then back to London. And so like my life has just been like unconventional in the most basic of ways
Mm,
in general. And it's weird because like no matter where I went, no matter who I was around, the spiritual people would always show up. Like I
yeah.
would always find spiritual, like I went to teach English in South Korea. My next door neighbors were like the most spiritual people you could meet. They used to enjoy hanging out in the mountains in Utah and just lying in the sun and just like being. And like, we would go to like and the head teacher in the school I was at, she was so spiritual, like she took us to like a tea shop and we sat there for like 6 hours enjoying the nuances of green tea. And like,
Beautiful.
she would take us to like the Buddhist monasteries, and like the other foreign teachers, they weren't interested in like exploring the culture or the spirituality. But because we connected at that level, she would take us to like, the weekend we would go to like a monastery and like spend the weekend in a monastery and like live with the monks and like the visitors there and just for fun, right? And so, wherever in the world I've ended up, even in Switzerland, San Francisco, like I've always experienced the joy of connecting with spiritual people wherever I was. And so I never even noticed that like there's any differences between them. I mean, I do
Yeah.
now. I look back on it and I'm like, oh my God, like, wow, there's like so many variations there and such different colors and different levels of, and I must have been going through some interesting things there and all that kind of stuff. And like, I can look back on it now because I've been in one place. I mean, I've been in London now since like 2008. So, even though I kind of moved around different parts of London and stuff, I kind of changed homes a few times in terms of where I lived and things. Like being in this place, I've realized most of the people I stay in touch with in London, like hardly any. Like I worked with
Yeah.
them and then like we move on, and there was the time I was always like hanging out with people that were in the Mayan calendar movement, and that was like an interesting few years of my life. And like the spiritual people and like just, and it's like it changed, like it's almost like seasonal, except the
Yeah.
seasons keep changing and the years keep changing, and there's different plants and different trees every cycle. So I
Mm.
don't know that I ever consciously became aware of it, but then now I look back on it and I'm like, well, yeah, because like those people have just dropped out of my life. And
Mm,
some people, like, it was really visible. Like, okay, we're separating that. Like, you're going down a path that I'm not going down. We're just going to create a separation there. We're just going to be different. We're just going to go different ways. And sometimes it would just be like the energy of what someone's getting into, or it wouldn't feel right. And I'm like, you know what? Like,
yeah.
you do, if you need to, that's your path, you do that. I'm staying here. Like, I, I guess about 10, 12 years ago, I started to realize I can create energetically the space I want to be in anywhere, right? So like, and over time and space. So like, I don't need to physically be in the same room with you, but like we can create that vibe, right? And so once
Yeah.
we're in that space, and I call that my play space,
Mm.
I don't openly share it with many people because like it's like it's my favorite place, right?
Mm.
But if you can, if like not everybody can access it, not everybody has the awareness or presence of being, and some people would get freaked out by it, right?
Yeah.
But like for those people that are ready for it, they just show up in my life. And then I'm there with them in whatever capacity they need me. And then once I've done my job, they move on. And
Mm.
so, like, I don't, because I've seen that now repeatedly with clients, whether it's marketing, whether it's coaching, whether it's like spiritual, whatever the work is, most of the time it takes the form of some professional context. And the spiritual stuff is just like, it just happens in the background. We don't even get into it.
Sprinkle. Yeah.
Yeah, like it just, that's the excuse they needed to show up and
Mm.
for
Yeah.
me to stay in a conversation. And then all the other stuff, it happens to the degree to which they need it. And then when they're done, like I don't bake people, I don't roast people. When they're done, they make themselves
Yeah.
It's like they come to you to get what they want and they leave getting what they need.
exactly. And when they're done, literally, it's like life transpires to
Hmm.
move them on. And so I've given up. Like I don't make sense of it. I'm
Yeah.
just like in awe
Which
of
is,
how amazing it is.
yeah, that's a lovely place to be. I have a sense that you're a real like traveler. You're traveling on in the earth plane, sprinkling the magic, and very comfortable with that as well. But you do have a circle, a close circle. Is that correct?
I was gonna say I'd almost look at it the other way around. Instead of
Okay.
being the traveler, the plane of the earth is traveling around
Yeah,
me,
okay.
right?
And visiting. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Very, very good.
So on that
Very
note,
nice.
shall we close this conversation and then come back to a new one when we reestablish the next conversation?
Absolutely, I've got a ream of
100%.
questions to come back
100%.
with, and there's just like I'm really want to dive into next time we come back is how the business side of things, the personal development side of things, and the spiritual, like you have just they're just weaved
Interwoven,
beautifully
isn't
together,
it? Mm.
right? And I really want to come back to that, but
But they
we
do say
do.
business is a spiritual game, don't they? Because you are giving so much to others, so it's
Well,
yeah,
okay, hang on. I
the
can't
spirit
leave.
in the
I now that you've said that, Sam, and now that you responded that way, Kirsty, I'm gonna have to question that perception, right?
Mhm.
That any of that is separate. Like you say business is the game, but what if that's just a perspective of reality that sees them
Absolutely.
as separate,
well, they're not separate though, are they? Nothing in the world is separate. Everything's connected. Everything's
right?
interwoven.
And
They're
so how
talking
you
about
do
like
one
the
thing is how you
matrix.
do everything, right?
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that game of business, that game of life, right? If it's not happening to us, but happening for us, right? Then the moment, the place from which you observe the experience that's manifest, and you understand that what you're seeing is the reflection of what you are rather than something other, then like it becomes you're totally in control of the experience, right? And it's not something that's happening, it's that you're the one that is making it happen,
Hmm.
right? And so like there's there's a place from which I like to play the game of life, the reality experience, right? And it's that place of, if I am the source of all that is, right, then I've created this moment here and now in whatever the experience is, right? And because it's all vibrational reality, if I wish to have a different experience of being, the only thing that I need to choose is which frequency I'm tuning into and become that vibrational state, because reality is only ever a vibrational match to who you are in that moment, right? And so, like, putting it in real materialistic terms, right? Just for a moment to kind of step out of the whole woo-woo spiritual stuff and into like
Yeah.
what people like to think of reality, right? All of its vibration. I went and experienced being financially abundant, right? I stepped into the vibration of it and I really allowed myself to fully experience that state of financial, like, hugeness, right? When I say hugeness, like, I mean it was 10 times order of magnitude of where I was in that moment, right? But it was so beyond what I could conceive because of where I was, that I had to realize this isn't what I am. Like, I had to literally let go of what was normal for me and like imagine completely differently, like, what would that possibly feel like if
Yeah.
I woke up, I didn't have to think twice about what I was spending. I didn't have to give any consideration if I want to get on a plane. I don't want to have to give any consideration. Do I want to buy something? If I want to buy it, I just do it. And so I kind of started playing with that experience of reality and allowed myself to become vibrationally present to how that's different. And there's a guy who does a really amazing job of describing this stuff. He's called Steve Pavlina. He's actually just started talking about um, the spirit of money recently. Although, like, about, I think it was 5 or 10 years ago, he did a whole video about the vibrational match and getting into vibrational state of abundance and then attracting abundance into your life. And so I took that and applied it to myself. And I remember very, very clearly, once I had felt abundant and noticed what that feeling was, within a month, I had achieved a state of financial independence that I had never considered I'd be able to do so quickly. And like it occurred, like I literally remember to this day, I was lying in bed. It's like 10 in the morning. I'm being really lazy here, right? And I'm like, I should wake up. And then I was like, well, do I have to? I know how much money's come into my account today because every day it was the same amount. And, basically the same amount's coming in every day. So I'm like, okay, well, I just went to sleep and woke up and I just made this much money. And then it got me thinking, hang on, because I like the most work that I was doing at that time was like doing the withdrawals. Because I was working with the system, it had set up, it was making the cash flow, providing me daily returns, and all I had to do every day, log on, do the withdrawal. So I was like, that was my work, right? Which is so much hard work taking money out. And it occurred to me, like, I'm lying there in bed and I'm like, hang on, how much did I just make today? And then I thought, okay, what is that if I multiply it by the month and then by the year? And I'm like, oh my God, like that's the goal that I set for myself. And I was lying there in bed and I was like, oh my God, like I don't even have to get out of bed and I made the money. And I remember that expression of, like, I think it was a Jean-Jacques Gabor who says, oh darling, I don't even get out for that much, or whatever it was, right? There's some famous actress. It's like, I don't get out
Yeah.
of bed for that much, right? And I was like just lying in bed and it suddenly occurred to me, I don't have to get out of bed if I don't want to. Like I've made more money than I've ever made, like as an employee somewhere, being an investor, like I'm getting a return on my capital, and like, oh my God, like this is so amazing. And like the thing is, I don't have anyone I could share it with. Because like most of the people around me would just be like, oh yeah, like we don't believe you. Or like they would be stuck in their job, but they couldn't be happy for me because they were all miserable in their
Yeah.
or whatever. And like it's not the sort of thing you want to kind of go about like just, shouting to everybody like, oh look at me, look, like, I'm not one of those people that wants to make a big deal about it. But I just remember that moment and I was just like, oh, I can't even tell anyone about this. Like, I'm so happy, like I'm chuffed, I'm really like enjoying the moment. I'm like, I can literally just lie in bed all day and I've made enough cash, like I don't even have to get out of bed if I don't want to. And so I was just really grateful in that moment. And like that vibrational match came about so fast, I didn't even notice it. But the only thing that I had done deliberately was to change my vibration and feel the vibration that I wasn't in and just experience that for a brief moment and do that repeatedly. And so everything in life, all the experiences, everything that happens, the way I like to think of it is the DNA in our cells, they're antenna, like tuning forks. The
Mm-hmm.
way that, like in the old days, a TV or a radio, when you used to have analog signals, you had to tune it manually to get the signal. And when the signal matched, you could hear the radio broadcast or watch the TV signal. So in the same way, the DNA in our cells, they don't create the cell, they receive the information through the energetic frequencies, through the airwaves, through the energetic imprint of who we are as a soul, and then they manifest into the physical form, the cellular imprint, the physical imprint, the material reality they experience. And so if the antenna of our physical structures are informed by the message, the information in our field, because our field is where like our thoughts, our awareness exists, right? Because like you can't cut a brain open and find a thought, but you can think it, like you can feel it, right? Oh, I just had that thought, that doesn't feel right. That thought feels good or bad, right? And so if you imagine thoughts are like floating around you in your consciousness, wherever that is, in a non-physical realm, and that there's a physical counterpart. So like the brain is like the hard drive and your energy field is like the RAM, and then like the programs that get downloaded into it, it's like the internet connection that you can just download whatever software you want now because we don't need to do the physical reboots. We don't have to do like the physical ceremonies as often. And so then you end up like all of your DNA, all of your cells are tuned into the frequency of whatever you tell it to. And so then it absorbs it and then it manifests it. So then your reticular activating system, your muscles, your brain, your body, your energy, your fuel in the physical realm is translating that signal that you're tuning into and making that your dominant reality. And we can't change everything at once. It's like you can't learn to run if you can't crawl. So the first thing you do is you learn to use your hands and your legs independently and like a baby wailing about. And then you learn to use them together, and then you can start inching and you become dangerous to your parents because they're worried something might happen, but actually you're just learning to create locomotion. And then you can use your legs independently of your hands, and then you can stand up, and then you can start moving and walking. And so, the same way, like within our realm of experience, we can't program our mental awareness, our spiritual awareness, our energetic awareness, our emotional awarenesses simultaneously. So then we have to choose something to start with, right? And so, in this version of society, the priority
Mm-hmm.
is given to the intellect. In other cultures, priority is given to the emotions or to the physical or to the, whatever's the necessary primary, and then sometimes that's all they ever do. And other times you then start being able to layer on other awarenesses. And so then when you can start doing multimodal awareness or vibrational awareness, now you're tapping into the juice of the engine, right? The real creative canvas that on a blank canvas you can create anything. And so with that, suddenly there's no restriction, there's no limit. And so that
Okay.
really long-winded way of answering, how does it all weave together for me, is like they're all just aspects of the same.
That's really beautiful. We are so coming back because I now want to unpick all of that. So for you, my darling, this has been quite natural. You've come in with this awareness, with this knowing, and all of that sort of thing. For others, generally speaking, there's a lot of shit to get through before they can even think, because everything you just said, I'm aware of, and I know it intellectually. I'm like, absolutely, that all makes sense. But how do we help people get to that point that don't have the gifts that you came in with straight away, and that are like been doing this for what feels like years and they're still not getting through? There's going to be, we've got some deep diving to do.
That's
We're going to
definitely
have you as
another.
our long form interview.
Yeah,
This is
for
definitely,
sure.
We can turn it into multiple half-hour versions.
I
Yes.
think
This will
this
be
is
the
great.
episode within the episode.
I'm going to so go through this whole thing, and I'm literally going to come armed with questions to the
I
next one.
know.
I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Well,
Oh, this has
Farhan, I
been
just want to say,
amazing.
thank you for sharing so openly and so vulnerably, because I know, like what you've said today, or some of the things you've said today, like you have said, I don't share this often, and I just really want to honor you and say thank you
Yeah.
for for sharing so deeply and so vulnerably, things that you don't openly share to many people. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
We have a little one in the background there,
Sorry,
floating in and out. Is it Jude?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you have a nice? Okay, I'm going to digress just a sec. So Farhan, just echoing Kirsty there, but also like what you've spoken about. There's so many people out there that have been really needing to hear this.
Wow.
And feel that they can't speak to anyone because they feel a bit weird, or it doesn't feel like the norm, right? So
they're the black sheep of the family. I mean, how many people have we spoken to that have got this spiritual gift or knowing, or
yeah,
want to call it, that they feel like they're the odd one out, and they don't fit into this society. So
yeah.
Sam, I just wanted to,
No, absolutely. And I think we're talking about the same thing. So you have just basically given everyone that feels like this permission to express and to explore, and know that actually they're not alone in this, and we're all just weaving our way through the magic, basically.
Amazing.
It's
Thank you.
fantastic.
I'm so glad.
Fantastic.
I'm so glad it's been able to be of use and of service.
Yeah, absolutely. I could speak to you all day, Hans. Awesome.
so good.
Right.
It'll be a great it'll be a great opportunity for people to come back to find out the answers to this stuff.
Yeah, there's so
Absolutely.
many. I think we've got at least 3 episodes to go.
Is that all?
With one.
Is that all?
That's so
Part
much.
one.
Did we think we were going to do it in one? I mean, come on.
We kind of knew, Kirst, actually.
Yeah, of course we did. Of course we did.
This isn't going to be a one-stop show.
No way.
But it's so great because this is exactly the kind of conversation that we love, and
Yeah.
it just it's so helpful. We're gonna finish up. So we always now ask our guests. So our name is Rise, and we have our 4 pillars from Rise. So I'm going to ask you, rejuvenate. What does that mean to you?
Okay. So to rejuvenate for me is about taking what is and breathing life into it and filling it with the most potential possible in whatever shape or form it is, and just giving it all the support it could possibly need to be as live and as vibrant as possible.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, second letter is inspire. What does that bring to your heart and mind?
So when you say the word inspire, immediately I'm thinking of this bright light shining within people that from within them is waiting to get expressed. And when they connect with that essence within them and allow it to come out of them, it can become their expression of life. And in being that way, give others permission to express themselves from within openly and outwardly.
So poetic.
Amazing. I know, right? Okay, so the third one is strengthen.
So for me, strengthen is really about connectedness. And if you think about what makes something strong, the best example I can give is something I just saw recently on Instagram. And a father was showing his son, if you take a single chopstick and break it, it breaks really easily. But if you have 10 chopsticks together, and that's your family, your friends, your community, you try to break it, then it doesn't break so easily. And so as soon as I hear that word strengthen, for me, it's those layers of connectedness, whether it's like within the body of the muscles and the tendons or in like whatever form, but it's like having many, many layers that are connected between two places and hold things together.
Okay,
Love
thank
that.
you for that. And the final word is elevate.
Oh, bless. When I think of elevate, I just imagine the wings behind you. It kind of, it caught me as you said the word elevate, and I was just thinking of how gracefully a bird lifts itself up off the ground and gets into flight, and how there are birds that can just literally so gracefully rise up and just like go upwards. And that sense of how we have the capacity to uplift ourselves and to elevate ourselves. And in so doing, we get the benefit of being able to see our world or our reality or our experience from 10,000 feet. And when we look down upon it, just how small and insignificant any one moment experience or part of that journey is in the context of the whole and that bigger picture that you get when you look from above. And so, with that, can I invite you both to join me in closing the space that we opened so that we can
Yes, please. Lovely.
return the container and give thanks and let go of all those that have been here in support of us? Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
So I just want to start by saying thank you to each and every one of us for showing up as we did, and for all the people that joined us in listening. And I want to say thank you to all of the angels, to all of the guardians, to all the protectors, to our higher selves, to our angels, to our archangels, to our ancestors, to our spirit guides, to the prophets, to those that came to guide us, to support us, to protect us. We give thanks and we invite you to now leave us in support, leave us strengthened, leave us protected, knowing that we have now completed the work that we came together to do in this sacred space. And as we give thanks and we let go of and we release all that was there in our support and our space in this circle, we allow the circle that we created to be released and resolved, to go back out into the world, for that energy to be dissipated and distributed to those that are in need of love, those that are in need of guidance, those that are in need of support, those that are in need of energy that may lack it, so that the energy is put to use where it is no longer needed here in this here and now. And in doing so, we give thanks to the Creator, to Great Spirit, Grandmother, Earth, Grandfather, Sun, to the moon, to the stars, to the source of all that is, to the source of life, to the divine truth of all that we are. And we give thanks to each and every one of us for being ourselves, and to the Creator of all that is. Amen.
Amen.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, lovely. This has been beautiful. Really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Farhan.
Most welcome.